Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. I'm Robbie Rhino, and in today's video I'm going to be doing a very belated review of the Tier 8 British Premium 4-shot autoloading tank destroyer, the GSOR 1008. So I missed out on doing a review of this tank when it came out quite a while ago, but I've realised it's in the store for 9,390 gold for at least the next 4 days. That's because it's being taken out of the premium tech tree, as a lot of tanks are. So it's full price, and I'm sure it'd be available at a discount in the future in some kind of bundle. But for some people it might be worth picking up at that price if you're looking for this kind of tank destroyer. And hopefully I'll be able to help you make up your mind with today's review. So it's a 4-shot auto-loading tank destroyer, very stealthy. It's got pretty decent mobility, a fully traversable turret. The gun is a 105mm gun. It has terrible DPM but very nice concealment. So I'll go over all of the stats of the GSOR 1008 in today's video. We'll compare to 3 other auto-loading tank destroyers at tier 8. We'll have a look at my commander and equipment setup and how that affects the stats of the GSOR 1008. I'll talk to you about the armor profile over here on tanks.gg, and then we're going to get stuck into some gameplay to try and demonstrate how this tank performs and the kind of sneaky shenanigans you can get up to with its kind of ambush style tank destroyer gameplay. So over here on my Excel spreadsheet, if I can think of the word, I've got the stats of the GSOR 1008 here on the left, and the 3 tanks we're going to be comparing it to are the KV-4 KTTS, the Soviet premium tier 8 tank destroyer, the Demolisher T-28, which is the American premium tier 8 tank destroyer, which was recently on sale, I believe, and lastly the Iron Rain, which is the 3-shot German premium tier 8 tank destroyer. All of these tanks in this comparison, I should say, are auto-loading tank destroyers, so they're going to be a good comparison to the stats of the GSOR 1008. If you haven't seen my reviews before, green is the best stat, red is the worst, and orange is somewhere in between in terms of the colour coding, and the ones highlighted in yellow are the updated stats with my commander and equipment setup applied, and I'll talk you through how I got to those numbers a little bit later on. But first we're going to talk about the XP bonus, the commander XP bonus and the silver bonus of all of these tanks, and see where the GSOR 1008 lies. So the GSOR 1008 has a 10% XP bonus. It doesn't have a commander XP bonus, and it has a 50% silver bonus. The silver bonus is the same on all of these tanks. 50% is going to be making you a nice chunk of silver per battle. The GSOR 1008 doesn't have a commander XP bonus, the same as the KV-4 KTTS and Iron Rain. However, the Demolisher T-28 is the one that you go to for your crew training at 75% commander XP. And lastly, an XP bonus of 10%, the same as the KV-4 KTTS, 5% less than the Iron Rain and Demolisher T-28. So yeah, pretty good silver maker, a little bit of XP and no commander XP bonus. And now we're going to get on into the raw stats of the GSOR 1008 and the other 3 tanks in this comparison. And we're going to start with the hit points at 1,200. So 1,200 hit points, not too many hit points for a tier 8 tank. However, you are a very sneaky tank destroyer that has to utilize its mobility and concealment to try and avoid fire. You can probably take between 3 and 6 shots depending on what kind of gun is firing at you. The KV-4 KTTS is the best in this comparison at 1,500 hit points, but that's essentially a hybrid heavy tank / tank destroyer. The GSOR 1008 has 50 more hit points than the Demolisher T-28, and it has 100 more hit points than the Iron Rain, which is the worst in this comparison. Next up is the view range, 370 meters on the GSOR 1008, which isn't brilliant. It's the same as the KV-4 KTTS, 10 meters less than the best in this comparison, which is the Demolisher T28, and it's 10 meters more than the Iron Rain, but you're going to want to do everything you can with that 370 meters view range to pump it up so you're able to use that in conjunction with your fantastic concealment, which you're about to get onto, to be able to spot for yourselves and outspot many of your opponents. So we're going to talk now about the still concealment rating, and the base still concealment figure for the GSOR 1008 is a fantastic 322.16 meters. Not quite as good as the Iron Rain, which has 288.98 meters, but it is a very sneaky boy indeed. It beats the Demolisher T28 and the KV4 KTTS by some way, as that is a very chunky boy indeed, and essentially, like I said, a heavy tank / tank destroyer hybrid. You can boost that concealment rating very dramatically with your commander skills, and I'll show you how in just a little bit. And your key thing with this tank is to get your view range as high as possible, your concealment down as low as possible, and have that gap between the view range and concealment rating as big as possible so you're able to outspot your opponents. Next, we're going to go on to the mobility of the GSOR 1008, and as you can see, a lot of it's highlighted in green, meaning it's the best in this comparison, so good news for this tank. You have a fairly small engine power of 640. It's not as good as the KV4 KTTS, which has a whopping 1200 horsepower engine, but it is a massive tank that needs a massive engine. It's a much better engine on the GSOR 1008 than the Iron Rain, which has a pathetic 160 horsepower engine, and it falls behind the Demolisher T28 by just a little bit, which has a 810 horsepower engine. However, the power to weight ratio is the best in this comparison. It beats the KV4 KTTS and the Demolisher T28 by a little bit, and it beats the Iron Rain by some way. It's a pretty good power to weight ratio for a fully traversable turret on a tank destroyer, and it allows you to get up to your top speed of 60 kilometers an hour relatively quickly. Your reverse speed is 17 kilometers an hour, your hull traverse is 28 degrees a second, and your turret traverse is 28 degrees a second as well. So your top forward speed at 60 kilometers an hour is the best in this comparison by some way, basically double. The worst in this comparison is the Demolisher T28 at 30 kilometers an hour forward. 17 kilometers an hour in reverse on the GSOR is not fantastic, but it is the best in this comparison by 5 kilometers an hour on all of the other tanks, so that's good news for the GSOR when you're coming down off of a ridgeline. The hull traverse at 28 degrees a second isn't fantastic. It's not quite as bad as the 18 degrees a second on the Demolisher T28, but it's not quite as good as the best in this comparison, which is the Iron Rain. However, you can get into position pretty well, better than the other tanks in this comparison, and I found that it isn't too much of an issue because you're playing an ambush style tank destroyer role at mid to long ranges, and there's no need really to turn quickly unless someone's coming at you and trying to circle you. And lastly, turret traverse 28 degrees a second. It's not quick, but it is the best in this comparison. Best in this comparison by 10 degrees a second over the Demolisher T28, which hasn't got a fully traversable turret. And it's much better than the KV4 KTTS and the Iron Rain as well, so that's good news. And gun handling skills will boost your turret traverse up to a very substantial level indeed, as you can see here on the right, and I'll tell you how I got to that figure when we talk about my commander and equipment setup. So that's talked about the mobility, the view range, concealment rating, hit points, and the XP, commander XP and silver bonuses. Next, we're going to get on to the gun and the gun handling. So for some reason it says 120mm gun. That is incorrect. It is a 105mm gun, so I'll just change that. Not sure why that is. Maybe that was just wishful thinking. The GSOR 1008 has a 105mm gun. I repeat, 105mm gun with 320 alpha damage on its standard AP and its premium APDS rounds. And it has 420 alpha damage on its HE rounds should you be able to penetrate them. It's a 4-shot autoloader which can deal 1280 damage in 6 seconds from the first shell, which means you have an interclip reload of 2 seconds between every shell, so nice and quick it definitely bursts out its damage very well indeed. The shell velocity is great on all of the rounds. On your AP and HE rounds, it's 1066 meters a second, and on your APDS rounds, even quicker, 1411 meters a second, meaning you can snipe very well at mid to long ranges and you don't have to give too much lead at all. This is a brilliant sniping tank destroyer. In terms of your penetration, 226mm on your standard AP rounds, and it bumps up to a very nice 321mm of penetration if you choose to use the premium APDS. Lastly, HE rounds, 53mm of penetration. I don't really carry any HE rounds with this tank. I find them largely useless. Mainly invest in your AP and your premium APDS rounds. So in terms of this comparison, as you can see, the shell velocity is the best in class on all of these rounds. Nice for sniping at mid to long ranges. It has the best intra-clip reload, so it gets its burst damage out very quickly indeed. The ammunition selection isn't too bad at all. However, bear in mind you will lose penetration over distance with your APDS rounds. At mid to long ranges, you're going to lose quite a lot of penetration, so a heat round might have been better, but the shell velocity does make up for that. In terms of penetration, 226mm on your standard round. It does beat the Demolisher T28, which has 218. It's one off of the KV4 KTTS, which has 227mm of standard pen, but it's definitely not as good as the Iron Rain, which has a fantastic 246mm. But 226mm of pen, it's more than enough to make work as a tier 8 tank destroyer if you know the weak spots of the enemy tanks, and if you don't, you can load those premium APDS rounds, 321mm of penetration. That is the best in this comparison by some way. The KV4 KTTS has 289mm. The Demolisher T28 has 265mm of penetration. And the Iron Rain, which has the best standard, doesn't have the best premium at 311mm. So pretty good news in terms of your ammo and your alpha damage and your auto-loading capacity on this tank. One thing to note about the other tanks, the KV4 KTTS is a 3-shot autoloader which can deal 960 damage in 5 seconds. The Demolisher T28 is a 3-shot autoloader which can deal 960 damage in 5 seconds as well. And the Iron Rain is a 3-shot autoloader which can deal 1170 damage in 5.4 seconds. So as you can see, this can deal the most damage in terms of this comparison. However, the quickest to get their rounds out are the KV4 KTTS and the Demolisher T28. The best alpha damage goes to the Iron Rain as it has a 128mm caliber gun. The KV4 KTTS has a 107mm caliber gun, and the Demolisher T28 has a 105mm caliber gun. So that's just that information for clarity. But the overview from what we've just seen, great intra-clip reload, very nice burst damage, great shell velocity, decent standard pen, and excellent best in class premium APDS penetration, and 320 alpha damage. With 4 of those shells for 1280 damage, does feel like it chunks down your opponents very nicely. Now we're going to get on to the gun handling and the DPM of the GSOR 1008, and as you can see, it is a bit of a mismatch of stats when we're talking about the gun handling and DPM. You have an aim time of 2.3 seconds, an accuracy of 0.34. Your DPM is a very low 1507.2. You reload your magazine in 45 seconds. You have 40 rounds of ammunition, a great 11 degrees of gun depression, and 10 degrees of gun elevation. So there's a lot to get your head around here in terms of the stats. It's not all good news. There are some bad elements about this tank, but of course you do have to outweigh that with the mobility and the concealment. So in terms of the aim time, 2.3 seconds. It's not quite as good as the 2.1 seconds on the Demolisher T28, but it does beat the KV4 KTTS and the Iron Rain by some way. Accuracy is best in this comparison, it beats all of the other tanks. However, the DPM is the worst in this comparison by some way. The Demolisher T28 has a 2100 DPM, the KV4 KTTS 1875 DPM, and the Iron Rain 1901 DPM, so you can see just how poor this DPM is on the GSOR 1008, and that alone might be enough to put off quite a few people. However, I would say bear in mind you do have that concealment factor and that mobility to be able to allow yourself to reload and engage, but that might be boring for some people having to have that massive reload. It's just a case of what playstyle suits you. In terms of your ammo capacity, as you can see, 40 rounds of ammunition is the worst in this comparison. The Iron Rain only has 2 more, and of course that is a higher caliber gun. The Demolisher T28 has 60 rounds and the KV4 KTTS has 90 rounds. However, the gun depression is the best in this comparison, 1 degree better than the Demolisher T28 and much better than the 5 degrees on the KV4 KTTS and the Iron Rain. That's terrible gun depression and very hard to use on ridgelines, whereas the GSOR 1008 is an absolute delight. The only thing you do have to watch out for that is that worst in class gun elevation, 10 degrees. If you're going down slope and trying to shoot up it, it can catch you out. So definitely watch out for that. The best in class goes to the KV4 KTTS at 20 degrees of gun elevation. So yeah, a bit of a mismatch there. Terrible DPM, fantastic gun depression, best in class accuracy, decent aim time. You've got that lovely shell velocity, decent standard pen, brilliant premium APDS, a 2-second interclip reload. You can get out the highest amount of damage in this comparison in 6 seconds. And then you've got to use your mobility to escape and your concealment to stay hidden and try and avoid fire. Now we're now going to go over to tanks.gg and have a look at the armour layout of the GSOR 1008 and see if the armour is any good. And judging by the colour coding here, it doesn't look like it's brilliant. If you're looking at the GSOR 1008 dead on, you can penetrate the front of the turret here with around 180mm of penetration. So tier 6 and 7 tanks with poor penetration might struggle, especially when it's using its 11 degrees of gun depression, but tier 8, 9 and 10 tanks will be able to butter through this tank. The upper hull is only 98mm thick and the lower plate is 76mm thick, meaning that to go through the lower plate you need around 120mm of penetration, and the upper plate you need around 140 to 150mm to go through. One thing to bear in mind is that if it's not using any of its gun depression, you do have this part of the top of the upper plate, which is an auto ricochet from the front, so you have to shoot lower than the mid plate on the upper plate, if that makes sense. This will be an auto ricochet angle due to the angling of the upper plate. And that goes to the bottom part of the turret as well. That will be an auto ricochet from the front. So you definitely have to watch out for that if it's not using its gun depression. If you do shoot here and it bounces, there's a high likelihood it will bounce up into the turret and penetrate. If you're shooting at this thing from a distance and slightly above, if you're going for the turret, I'd shoot towards the left hand side because the right hand side does have a thicker part on it and you might bounce off of the top of the turret here at an auto ricochet angle. So shoot to the left of the turret and it's an easier penetration. One thing to note about the side armour of this tank is it's 50mm side armour, so it's pretty good at side scraping, which is unusual for a glass cannon tank destroyer. You're able to side scrape up to 151mm caliber gun, so definitely make use of that if you're on an urban map. However, you can see if you're angling at 45 degrees, it's going to be weak from all angles unless you hit the outer edges of the upper hull, and that will be auto ricochet angle, so shoot the part nearest to you. One other thing to know about this tank is that you can't damage it from the front if you shoot straight into the tracks, because the hull doesn't go over into the tracks, so that's something to bear in mind. But from the side you can pen and track it in place if you shoot mid to the upper part of the tracks, and the same for the rear if you shoot right to the left of the last track wheel. And now we're going to have a look at the gun depression. You only have 8 degrees over the back, so bear in mind if you're running away from an opponent, and you have 11 degrees at the front, and this is what it looks like if you're hold down on a ridgeline. You only need 180mm to go through the front of the turret here. The upper hole will be an auto ricochet in this bit underneath the gun, but the upper plate you only need 180mm, and if it exposes its lower plate at this angle, you're going to only need 160 to 170mm of armour to go through. One last thing to bear in mind is that it does have a side skirt here of 25mm that will absorb some HE damage, and it might absorb a heat shell if you're trying to fire heat through into the side of this vehicle. It's quite a long vehicle, so a big target from the side, and from the rear you're going to be able to penetrate with HE rounds. Only need about 40mm to go through that. But yeah, having a fully traversable turret with 11 degrees of gun depression and nice mobility, along with your great concealment, is going to be a big factor in how much you like this tank. There are those auto ricochet angles, as you can see on the upper plate, bottom part of the turret, underneath the turret I should say, and that top right portion on the turret. Watch out for that. That's an auto ricochet angle, as the armor is 38.1mm compared to 25.4mm on the left hand side. That's pretty much all I can tell you about the armor of the GSOR 1008. We're now going to head back over into Excel. I'll tell you about my commander and equipment setup, how it affects the stats of the GSOR 1008, and then we're going to get stuck into the gameplay. So what equipment do I run on the GSOR 1008? Well, in terms of my equipment, I run advanced optics, advanced concealment, and improved ventilation. And on my commander, I run 6th sense, born leader, rapid loading, steady aim, rapid aim, snapshot, camouflage expertise, muffled shot, and situational awareness. So how does that affect the stats of the GSOR 1008? Well, it's boosted my view range to 484 meters, which is pretty decent for a tier 8 tank destroyer, and it's reduced my still concealment to 231 meters, meaning that the difference between that is pretty high. I'm going to be able to outspot a lot of different tank destroyers, medium tanks and heavy tanks, and even some of the light tanks that have poorer concealment, especially if I'm using the foliage and utilizing the trees and bushage on the map. In terms of the turret traverse, that has improved from a pretty poor 28 degrees a second to 34.89 degrees a second due to the gun handling skills. That means that this turret does go around quite nicely now, and you're able to keep your gun around on tanks that might be trying to get around you. And lastly, in terms of the gun handling and DPM, I now have an aim time of 2.08 seconds, which is very nice indeed, an accuracy of 0.27, which is fantastic, a DPM of 1850. While it's still pretty terrible, it's not as bad as the 1507.2, which was the base DPM, and I now reload the 4 shells in 35.55 seconds, and that is making sure I use combat rations as a third consumable choice, so I'm able to boost up my view range, DPM, and also my gun handling. So that's it for the stats of the GSOR 1008 and this comparison. As you can see, it's a very sneaky mobile tank destroyer, poor DPM, but a very nice gun with good shell velocity and penetration. We're now going to head on into the first gameplay to see how it performs. So we're now into the first of 3 gameplays in today's video, and we're here in the GSOR 1008 on Malinovka in a team destruction battle. Just to let you all know, in these gameplays, the commander and equipment setup I was kind of playing with, these were gameplays back when the tank was released, so if you see a different reload or you see different kind of gun handling, view range and still concealment, that kind of thing, that would explain it. But I've settled on the command and equipment setup that I showed you in the statistics part of today's video to try and get this as stealthy as possible whilst also maintaining pretty good gun handling and also being able to get that DPM as high as possible. So there you can see how fantastic it is to have that 2-second intraclip reload as we take out that Batchat 12T very quick. But now you have this conundrum whether or not you go for a reload, you wait for the reload and get the 4 shells in for your next target, or you keep the 2 shells in case you need them. I feel pretty safe here on this ridgeline, so I'm going to go for the full reload whilst also trying to go backwards and forwards and avoiding getting hit by the artillery. We are spotted for quite a long time here, and this was from quite a long time ago before the artillery symbol was there to let you know that they are aiming at you, so we're going to have to be a little bit careful with that one. We have a beautiful shot there that tracks the Barask in place and gets that Barask taken out, and we've already had a nice impact there, taken out a light tank and the Barask, which is a very dangerous medium tank indeed. And then we're going to have to leave this position whilst we are reloading, so we fall back a ridgeline and make sure we keep our hit points intact, because they are coming down the one line and they're going to be sort of flanking us shortly. So I'm going to fall back a ridgeline and put myself into a position where hopefully I won't get spotted if I fire. One thing to note when I'm firing is watch out for the bloom on the gun. When you fire, the reticle does bloom out quite a lot, and because of the 2-second intraclip reload, it means that you're not able to fully aim in between your magazine. It's something that you either have to just wait for, or you utilize that 2-second intraclip reload and you put your shells out and just hope that they fly true. At mid to short ranges it works really well. At longer ranges it can be a bit annoying. I believe in this gameplay I might be using a piece of mobility equipment, so the gun handling might be a little bit worse, but it's the same principle with the commander and equipment setup that I showed you in the statistics part of today's video. So in the first 3 minutes of this battle we have picked up just shy of 1,000 damage, 603 assistance, but we have managed to get a couple kills. Now we spotted this KV-4 in the open, and here you're seeing the absolute beauty of this gun. We get 2 shells into him and set him on fire, and unfortunately he does go down into a ridgeline, which means our 3rd shell misses. And then we try and fire a speculative shot at the T-110E4, which just has ridiculous armour, doesn't it, for a tank that is that good. And we bounce, so we went for that reload, or we were forced into that reload, and we're just going to wait on this ridgeline. Use this bush in front of us, poke forward into it and see if we can get some spots out along the 0 line and towards the southeast and the south part of the map. You can find yourself getting into positions, getting a lot of assistance in this tank and playing like a kind of light tank or a passive light tank if you get forward into a nice bush. But it is also very useful for doing this kind of sniping ambush style gameplay, waiting for the opportunity and then striking. You can see here again we're having that conundrum whether we keep the shells in, but fortunately we have the Waffenträger Alfie 100 side on and we get a shell into him. And then we go for the reload, and I'm always trying to make sure I'm reloading whilst I'm on the move. If I know I'm going to be moving for 20 to 30 seconds, I'm making sure I'm going to be fully loaded when I get there, and the only case I wouldn't do that is if I felt like I'm going to need the shells whilst I'm in sort of transportation mode. We're now going to go forward, use the mobility of this tank. You can see you get up to your top speed pretty nicely in the GSOR because of that power to weight ratio, and it's just a nice combination of concealment and firepower, gun depression and mobility, and it does feel really nice. The gun handling can be a bit iffy with that gun bloom in between your shots, but apart from that, the only major downside really is that horrific DPM, and for some players that's just enough to put you off getting the tank no matter how much you invest into improving your DPM with the gun handling skills. It's just not going to do it for you, and I completely understand that. But for those of you that like that more passive tank destroyer gameplay where you're ambushing tanks, you're utilizing your concealment, and you're thinking about flanking your opponents and coming in from different positions at mid to long ranges, this tank will do you really well. You can see here as we're moving forward trying to get the last little bits of damage on tanks, we're getting lovely assistance on this IS-4 we're in a tier 10 game, showing you the kind of impact you can have in this tank. You don't have to play crazily passive, you can be aggressive and use your hit points towards the sort of latter stages of the battle if needed. And here we're just deciding how to go around. There's a Jagdtiger, which is a turretless tier 9 German tank destroyer. We're going to come round, he is tracked in place, and we managed to put 2 shells into him. We have 1 left, and we're going to hopefully put it into this IS-4 and take him out, but we get sniped from the side by the Progetto 65. Doesn't matter too much, we've still had a pretty decent result there, and it's all now about the team taking out the final medium tank, and then we'll be able to have a look at the end results screen. So in our first gameplay here on Malinovka, that was a victory. We managed to finish in second place on our team with a profit of 73,000 silver, I believe it was, 1,566 base experience points, 2 kills, 2.6k direct damage, 2.5k assistance, and an all-round pretty decent game. So that's it for the first gameplay. We're now going to head on into the second one. So you're joining me 2 minutes into the second gameplay in today's video. We're here in the GSOR 1008 on Alamein in a standard battle. We've came to this location in G4, just waiting for some tanks to present themselves to us in the sort of central area and down the 1 and 2 line. I don't want to be too aggressive at the moment and lose hit points, but we have managed to find a target, I should say, and we put 2 shells in quick succession into that VK4502A. Going to try and get 1 more in. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to aim in for long enough there. I didn't want to take damage, so we just get a tracking shot in on him, and we fall back behind hard cover to try and avoid taking fire from enemy tanks and artillery. Fortunately for us, that tracking shot paid dividends, and we managed to pick up some assistance, taking our assistance to 1028. And here is the really frustrating part of the GSOR, just waiting for this very, very long reload to take its course so we can get stuck back into the battle. And it's a gameplay, this gameplay in particular, that can show you the kind of good and the bad and the ugly of the GSOR 1008. So you're going to see the ability towards the end that the GSOR has to run rings around opponents if it's given the free reign of the battlefield. When there's less tanks on the battlefield, you're able to use your mobility and your concealment and view range to outspot your opponents. But you're now going to see a portion of the battle where I'm not able to have the impact that I want to. I'm going to have to go for a reload whilst I advance into a new position, and it's just going to be a little bit unfortunate that we're not able to time our reloads with the enemy's advances for the moment. Anyway, we're going to come up here to this ridgeline and just poke over and see what we can spot towards the northwest of the map. Got 10 seconds left, but we're still going to try and get some vision out and hopefully get some more assistance. Maybe we can flank this heavy below us and get another tank taken out of the game. But we do spot this Emil 1. He's moving after our teammate, so we're going to go for 1 shot into him. We're thinking about going over, but we are detected, so there's potentially another tank in the distance. The Progetto 54 comes around, tries to get into us, but we luckily snap a shot in there, showing you the great shell velocity. We managed to get our shell off before him. And now it looks like we're going to have to retreat. Our teammate, our P44 Pantera, falls, and we're just going to have to fall back towards our capture circle as the enemies look like they're going to be overwhelming our tanks towards the east of the map as well. I should have reloaded or gone for a full reload about 10 or 12 seconds ago, and I might have been reloaded for this Emil 1. As it stands, I only have 2 rounds, and unfortunately we don't roll high enough to take him out, and we're on the reload again. And it's those kind of timings that can be the difference between a win and a loss on a close game. I might have been reloaded in time to take him out, and it might have been that tank taken out that would have won us the game. Instead, we're going to have to keep falling back, use our mobility to get to a position where we can hopefully use our concealment and view range to outspot the opponents coming in towards our base, and our tank destroyers and artillery can hopefully back us up and take out the enemy. It's not looking great. We are 3 tanks behind. I'm going to try and support this other GSOR there on the other side of the map, but he gets taken out by that Emil one that we left on a one shot, and that's where it's really gutting to have timed your reloads wrong. You do really have to think a little bit in this tank about when you're going to go for your reload and when you're going to make sure to keep your shells in case an enemy is coming around you. It's just about awareness of the minimap and where enemies were last spotted, and always keep an eye on what hit points the enemies are on in case you do encounter them later. You'll have a good idea of whether you can go all in on them, take a shot and take them out, or whether you have to play it a little bit more cautiously. I do have all of my hit points intact, so I can be aggressive here in the sense that I'm the only one with hit points that can go forward and spot. We managed to take out the Emil one there. We keep our 3 shells in as there are enemies spotted towards our base. We get 1 in on that Trinity Mark II. Unfortunately, our last shell in the magazine takes him out. However, we have got flanked by this tier 7 Czech tank, and now we are on a reload, so we're going to have to shift it with our mobility whilst we are reloading and put as much distance between us and the enemies as possible, and hopefully we're going to be able to outspot our opponents and take our enemies out by using our concealment. So you can see here the mobility is good enough to get away from sort of sluggish mediums and heavy tanks and put enough distance in between me and them, so I'm able to utilise the concealment of this tank. I was hoping that VZ would just push out there, but it looks like he's stopped behind that rock. We're going to be as passive as possible, only moving forward when we really need to, or we really feel we're going to have to go forward, because I want to try and keep as many hit points on my vehicle in this engagement, because we're now in a 1 versus 5. There's a pretty good chance of me winning this 1 versus 5 due to the fact of I have great concealment, I have a fantastic autoloader, and there are 2 artillery on the enemy team, meaning there's only 3 actual tanks that can be chasing me. I've decided to go after this VZ-44-1. I auto-aim 3 shells into him, and then make sure with the 3rd shell, I should say, we aim and take him out. And now we're going to hug this rock until we are no longer spotted, trying to stop the artillery going for us, and also giving us some time to reload. Unfortunately for us, as we pop back up, the GSOR is racing in on full health. We only have 539 hit points left, and we're kind of literally stuck between a rock and a hard place at the moment. If I push out, there's a good chance artillery will go for me, and there's the SU-130 PM coming for us as well. We kind of got ourselves isolated in this little nook here. If I managed to put more distance between me and that VZ at the start, we might have been able to get out of that one. But we still had a relatively good result nonetheless in a fairly short space of time. We unfortunately lost that game, but we still finished on the MVP screen in 3rd place with 5 kills, a high caliber sniper medal, 1,197 base experience, 5 kills, 4.4k direct damage and 1.1k assistance. And in another game, in another time, that collar banners might have been mine. But that's it for the 2nd gameplay. We're now going to head on into the 3rd and final gameplay. So you're joining me a minute into the 3rd and final gameplay of today's video. We're here on Erlenberg in the GSOR 1008. It's a standard battle, and we've come to this location down the 9 line, just trying to get some shots in at tanks that are coming in from the north. We get a couple of shots in on that Peugeot 54. We're up to 679 damage, and then we're going to go for a reload. And whilst we are reloading, we're going to move into a different position, see if we can get a different angle on our opponents, but also try and chase away any artillery that might be targeting us. And then we're going to go back in when we are reloaded and see if we're able to spot some tanks that are hidden down towards the sort of B6, B7 location, and also get some shots into any tanks that might venture in towards the town. And this gameplay is a showcase of patience and what the GSOR can do if it's given enough time in a game to consistently reload and reposition and re-stealth And you're going to see here the power of the fantastic intraclip reload as we put 4 rounds into this 4502A in very quick succession, and we're going to leave him on a one shot. He's on 238 hit points, and that's the GSOR in a nutshell. Again, when we are reloading, going to activate our combat rations, boost our reload, and we're going to move into a different position, see if we can get some vision whilst we're reloading, get a different angle, and also cover the capture circle. We don't want to be too aggressive at the moment. We could push forward, and I feel quite confident with the concealment and the view range of the GSOR to kind of know when I'm going to get fired in most scenarios, and I feel like I have control of the tank in many different areas. But you make one wrong move, you get into the wrong position, and you're not reloaded, and it can be lights out for you in the GSOR. So I'm going to play slightly more passive. This was probably in the first play session in this tank back when the tank was released, so I was just getting a good feel for the tank. We have 3 shots left in this clip. We're keeping them in because at the moment there's no rush. We have lots of support around us, and it looks like we might have an opportunity to get a shot in at any moment. If you're not going to get a shot between sort of 5 and 10 seconds, or you think you're not, it's probably always worth going for a full reload, so you are fully reloaded in case you do have a lovely opportunity like a nice big heavy crossing an open field or something like that. It's quite a close game. We're down by 2 tanks. We have 2,369 damage. We're trying to feather a target in this Panther too, but he's behind the buildings and it looks like he's probably going to get taken out by our teammate. So there's no need to panic or no need to rush. We're just going to reverse up, see if we can get a shot in on this IS who's down there. Maybe we can get some vision towards the south at tanks that are trying to head towards our base. That IS gets lit up again. Turn round, make sure we use the full extent of our 11 degrees of gun depression. Remember, you only have 8 over the back of the tank. We managed to get a nice shell there in on that Barask as it crosses. That just shows you how good the shell velocity is. We didn't have to give too much lead. We could snap it in, and it's a fantastic sniping tank. We're being targeted most likely from artillery, so again we're going to get out of dodge, and whilst we are moving we're going to get a full clip reloaded back into our magazine so we're ready to go for the next tank that presents itself. And this is just GSOR 1008-101. You get into positions to outspot your opponents, you ambush a tank, then you retreat, you get re-stealthed, you get reloaded, and then you do it all over again. You have great gun depression to use ridge lines. 11 degrees is fantastic. You've got enough mobility to get to where you need to be, but also to retreat when you get into a slightly tricky situation. You've just got to be careful about getting into positions which catch you out and you are stuck there whilst you haven't got any ammunition left. There we get 3 shots into that Oni, and he gets subsequently taken out by our Emil 1. He's not having a good day with autoloaders. And then we're going to go off another reload, and we're now into our premium APDS rounds. We're only down by 1 tank now, and it's a much closer game. We have all of our hit points intact, so if needs be, we can always be the one that goes forward, gets the vision, because we do have that great concealment. Waiting for our reload, really frustrating there because we have shots on this hammer. We get one into him, and then the Sturm Tiger P derps him, and it's not hammer time anymore. Back to the garage for the hammer. Yeah, poor hammer. I feel sorry for the Tigers in this game. They can be really good tanks, but yeah, they can be penetrated by those big derp guns. So now we're getting capped. We have 3 shots left in our magazine, and we should be able to come over and spot what's in the capture circle. I feel pretty confident of being able to outspot what is there. There's no massive rush at the moment. There's still 1 minute or over 1 minute left on the capture circle, and we do have light tanks in play, so I'm going to see if they're going to go forward and spot what's in the cap. Just going to peek up here and see if we can see what it is. There is that little dip down into the river which they might be hiding in. We're now up by 1 tank and we have tanks advancing, so we're going to make use of their vision and we're going to hopefully be the one to be able to get a shot into the tank captain, and we do, and take out that Barask. Go for the reload straight away, and we're always constantly scanning the minimap for our next target to make sure we make the most out of this pretty horrific DPM, because you don't want to be far away from your next target when you're reloaded. You want to be thinking about where to go for your next bit of damage in the game, and yeah, trying to think about how you get there and the best course of action so you maximize the poor DPM and still have some good damage results. We do have our heavy tank still holding that flank there against the enemy tank destroyer. I'm going to ask him to fall back so we bait that tank destroyer over the ridgeline. We have a perfect position here to go hold down with our 11 degrees of gun depression, and as soon as this tank destroyer crests that ridgeline, we should be able to take him out. We're fully loaded, and it's just about playing that game of patience here. There's another tank destroyer heading in who is situated in B8. It doesn't look like this Iron Rain fancies coming over this ridgeline. He doesn't look like he's stupid at the moment, so hopefully for us we can advance now and ambush the Iron Rain as he's below on the ridgeline. And it's just patience in this tank. It's not the most exhilarating gameplay, I completely admit, but it's effective, especially if the games are drawn out. It can be frustrating in the fast games where one team steamrolls another, but it is still a nice tank and a good change of pace to play, and a good tank to play if you find yourself getting caught out a lot and you want to go back to basics and be patient and yeah, improve your win rate and don't get caught out in certain positions. Now we're the only ones with this heavy tank here on the 9 line. We're still playing the patient game. I could have been way more aggressive in this game, but this was, again, like I said earlier, one of my first games in this tank, and it did work out there for that kill on the Iron Rain. We managed to keep our heavy tank in the game. We're going to go for a reload. Again, go around in a circle, try and avoid getting hit by artillery, and then hopefully we're able to get some damage in on this medium tank, which is coming up to our heavy tank in the IS. Always trying to let the teammates know how long left on the reload using the radio commands. We're going to try and get the high ground here, try and get a different angle on this enemy medium tank so we're able to get a crossfire and take him out of the game. And this should be the last bit of damage that we're going to get in the game, depending on where the enemy tank destroyer is. We're going to come up behind this IS. You can see the great mobility here. Not too bad at all. You're going to outrun most heavy tanks. It looks like the enemy tanks have retreated. We have all of our hit points in place, so now we can be aggressive. We can take a couple of shots if needed. The UDES is running away, but it's a little bit too late for you. Not too much lead needed with the fantastic shell velocity of this tank. Going to see if we can get the last couple of shells into this Scorpion. He misses us. We're going to advance. Keep our 2 shells in because we won't be able to reload 4 shells in time for when he's next spotted. And yeah, it's just that race at the end of the game now to get that last bit of damage. As soon as we get to the crest of this ridgeline, we're going to fire, and then hopefully the Scorpion will come up again for us and we can get our remaining shell into him, which we do. He's on a 1-shot, and our friendly IS, which we helped out earlier, takes him out for us, and that's a pretty good result in the GSOR 1008. So in that game we finished in 2nd place on our team. 3 kills, sniper, high caliber, first class, 1715 base experience points, and 5.7k damage with 128,000 silver profit. And the last gameplay really does show you that with patience and longer drawn out games, that was an 11-minute game, you are able to have some pretty nice results in the GSOR. So I hope that you've enjoyed today's review of the GSOR 1008. Let me know if you like this tank, or if you've picked it up, or if you prefer the other auto-loading premium tier 8 tanks. Thank you all so much for your support, and until next time, I'll see you on the battlefield, and bye for now.